Our next question comes from an anonymous viewer who asks, Ramsey, why don't you wear a shirt in your Q&A with the coach videos? I would prefer if you wore a shirt. Okay. Just for you, my friend. Now, I usually film these after lifting, and it's pretty hot and humid here in Shanghai in the subtropical region, and so my shirts get pretty, moist and wet and drippy, and I don't like wearing that stuff when I'm sitting there talking. But just for you. All right, next question. Also from an anonymous viewer who says, Ramsey, where do you get those gay Spider-Man shirts that you wear in your videos? Next question. Our next question comes from Chuck Norris 202. Cool screen name. Who has been training for a while. He does Muay Thai, and his coach tells him that his skills are pretty good, but he seems to lack cardio, and he hates running, so he wants to do what are some alternative ways to increase his cardio. Should he shadow box more, or swim, or what? All right, Chuck, my friend. I'm going to tell you what. I don't run anymore. I used to. When I was younger, back in my 20s, I ran all the time. I trained for marathons with my older brother, and the more I ran, the more it wore down my joints to the point where I can't do it anymore for more than 5 to 10 minutes at a time. So I don't run. And I don't skip rope either. And I've got cardio for days. I can spar all day long. And some days I actually do. So how do I do it? Well, man, there are so many activities that you do in training that work your cardio. And cardio is a bit of a misnomer there because it's more like muscular adaptation to specific activities. So a lot of times I'll have people who are really good boxers or kickboxers come into the jiu-jitsu class and try jiu-jitsu for the very first time. And after 30 seconds, they will gas out and be like, but I thought my cardio was good. I'm a pro kickboxer. What happened to my cardio? And cardio means heart. It's the condition and health of your heart. But it has nothing to do with that. It is the sport-specific movement. Right? So if you have trained to throw jabs and bounce on your feet all day and throw kicks and all this, that has nothing to do with rolling on the ground. It's a whole different skill set. It is a whole different set of movements and body mechanics. And so you have to adapt to that set of movement and body mechanics. So a lot of people ask me, what should I do for jiu-jitsu, for cardio? What do you do? And I'll say, I do more jiu-jitsu. Now, Bruce Lee is not necessarily the best source to go to for fighting advice for combat sports, because the man never did combat sports. But he did say something very, very important about training. He said your training should be as close to the movements that you will use in a fight as possible. And that makes a lot of sense to me as far as cardio training goes. Cardio training. Muscle endurance, or whatever you want to call it. The training that allows you to have enough endurance so you don't get tired and spent and gas out. Okay, whether that actually is your heart or your lung capacity or your muscles' ability to adapt and move efficiently, whatever you want to call that, most people just put it under the blanket of cardio. Okay? So the best movement that you can do for cardio in jiu-jitsu is jiu-jitsu. Do more rolling, for example. Do more drills. And by drills, I don't just mean going through the motions. I mean, a drill with some actual resistance with a specific objective. And the same thing with Muay Thai. One of the best cardio drills for Muay Thai, or muscle adaptation drills, is heavy bag work. Make sure you're getting your rounds on the bag every single day. 3 rounds on the bag is a good benchmark. If you're not doing that, then do it. Now, if you like running, cool, run. If it doesn't give you any joint problems, great. It won't make you a worse fighter. But if you don't have the time, if you really don't have the time, or if it is messing up your hips and your knees, and you've got plantar myofasciitis like I do in both feet, then running is simply not an option. So what is an option? Go through the movements of the actual combat sport itself. Throw 100 kicks a day per leg on the bag. Throw 100 teeps a day per leg on the bag. Throw 100 elbows per arm, each type of elbow. Throw 100 jabs, throw 100 of those, throw 100 of each specific combination that you want to develop. Spend some serious time doing that. Yeah, do some shadow boxing. If you're not doing shadow boxing, that's huge. That's huge. One of my old boxing coaches, he noticed I really hated skipping rope. And I wasn't very good at it, and I just had to keep stopping and starting over and stopping and starting over, and I wasn't getting a workout at all because I was just fumbling and tripping over a rope. And eventually he was like, okay, screw it, just shadow box. Do 30 minutes of shadow boxing. And with that 30 minutes of shadow boxing, you know what happened? I actually developed my cardio, if you will, but I also got better at boxing because I was doing movements directly related to the sport of boxing. So again, that one pearl of wisdom from our friend Bruce Lee, man, make your training emulate the movements that you will use in a fight. And that is the best cardio training. Now, you did ask about swimming, and that's good stuff. If you can swim, cool. One big bonus about swimming over running is that it is almost zero impact on your joints. So it's not going to mess up your hips or your knees or aggravate your feet if you've got plantar myofasciitis or something like that. So if you can do it, if you've got access to a pool, yeah, swim, 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 my friend. All right, next question. Our next question comes from Raptorus Rex, who says, what is your take on ninjutsu as a fighting style? I saw a video on it, and there was this dude using the martial art a while back. I just wanted to know your thoughts, what you think about it. Love your content, man. Hey, thank you. I love the fact that you're watching my content. So, ninjutsu. I think this is going to be a short answer. Most of the ninjutsu practitioners that I've met are basically martial arts themed cosplayers. They dress up in black outfits and they play with swords and ninja weapons, and they have fun, reenacting some type of historical themed Japanese experience, and good for them. If they have fun doing that, cool. If you like live action role playing ninja style, great, cool. As far as fighting goes, I can honestly say I've never really met a ninjutsu practitioner who was particularly good at hand-to-hand combat. That being said, almost all of the ninjutsu practitioners I've met own at least one sword. And if a guy is coming at you with a sword, as you saw in the last video we put up, you don't want to mess with that. So, as tempting as it may be to pick on ninjas because of their lack of sparring or whatever in their ninja schools, they've got swords, so don't mess with those guys. That being said, who was it? Was it Kirk Jenham? I'm blanking on the dude's name. The guy who ended up winning, I think it was it UFC 3 or UFC 4? One of those early UFCs where it was the tournament format and they had alternates, and Jenham was one of the alternates. That means if the fighter who was winning the tournament got injured and couldn't continue, the alternate would step in and replace him without actually having fought. And so in this tournament, Hoist Gracie and Ken Shamrock, both who were supposed to be the finalists, got injured and had to drop out. And so the runner-up, this karate dude, blanking on the name, and Jenham, this ninjutsu practitioner, stepped in the cage. Now, the karate dude had fought like 2 fights previously. He had some injuries. He was fatigued. And Jenham, the ninja, stepped in completely fresh. And what did he do? Well, the completely fresh ninja stepped in, ended up winning the UFC belt via stealth, exactly the way a real ninja would, sneak into the tournament, insert himself all sneakily into the bracket and win without ever doing a qualifying match. That's exactly how ninjas do it. They don't play fair. So that's my take on ninjutsu. Next question. Our next question comes from Peter Barry. He asks, starting out in any martial arts from a newbie's point of view and starting from scratch, after joining a class and wanting to step it up fitness-wise, how would you suggest to achieve a better fitness level for martial arts? And what areas would you suggest to concentrate on? Okay. Well, Peter, first, show up. And keep showing up. Keep showing up, because like I said to the other guy, those sport-specific or martial arts-specific movements that you do in class are going to be the most important for adapting to those specific movements. But what can you do outside of class or in addition to class to optimize your experience? Well, I'll tell you a few things I wish I would have started doing earlier and more often. Lifting, specifically squats, deadlifts, and pull-ups for strength training. Why those lifts in specific? One, pulling strength that you get from pull-ups and also deadlifts, I would say, is the most important type of strength for combat sports, especially for grappling. It is much more significant how much you can pull and how quickly you can pull and how much power you can generate on a pull than a push, believe it or not. What else? The deadlift and the squat will give you the most bang for your buck as far as strength training goes. They will make you stronger faster, they will work more muscles, but more importantly, they will develop your posture, the kind of posture you need for fighting, whether it's grappling or striking. The head-tail connection and making your core truly functionally strong. So, squats, deadlifts, pull-ups, do more of those. One other thing that is just generally a good idea for cardio, like I was talking about with the other guy, is burpees. Whatever you're doing, add a few burpees to the mix to condition your body to go from the lowest level to the highest, and then again and again and again. It's a huge expenditure of energy, but when you can get your body to adapt to that type of movement, you'll be fairly well adapted to most ranges of combat as far as energy expenditure. So burpees are a good thing to add into whatever routine you're doing if you're not doing them already. Next question. Our next question comes from our friend Jay, who says, how close do you think that boxing and MMA are, and how much transfer is there? Okay, well, this is one of those questions that's been addressed a lot on the internet, but here's my take. I would say most boxing technique translates pretty well to MMA. There's a lot you've got to modify, and there's a lot about boxing that boxers who don't really understand the sport of MMA, they'll look at an MMA fight and be like, those guys don't know what they're doing. They don't move like me, because they don't understand the ranges of combat in a mixed martial arts fight, like an MMA fighter does. And if you move exactly the same way a boxer does, without understanding the ranges of combat in MMA, well, you're going to be kissing the canvas, you're going to give up your back, you're going to get kicked in the head. All these other options that don't exist in boxing will come to fruition. So it's a piece of the puzzle. It's a very important piece. Boxing is awesome, and I think all MMA fighters should make a diligent study of it. And all MMA fighters really should respect the sport of boxing. It is a fantastic sport. It is an awesome martial art. It is one of the most important martial arts, in my opinion. And if you don't think boxing is a martial art, you don't know what martial arts are. So, yeah, going the other way, however, how much of MMA translates to boxing? Well, I would say, that's a good question. That is a good question. MMA fighters, generally speaking, probably have just as much trouble transitioning to the sport of boxing as boxers do transitioning to the sport of MMA. And why is that? Because most MMA fighters train in boxing as well, but they don't train at that level, and again, they don't train in the same ranges of combat as boxers do. So, from my personal experience, when I first started training specifically for boxing, and this was after competing in professional mixed martial arts, after doing several pro fights, after competing as a kickboxer, I thought, well, I understand boxing. I really didn't. I thought I did. I really didn't. And when I started making a diligent study of boxing with some professional boxing coaches and sparring and training with some professional boxers, I realized, wow, there's a whole lot more to this sport and this science and this martial art than I thought there was. There's much more to this than I gave it credit for. So either way, it's a tough transition, and you have to put in the work. You've got to put in a lot of work as a boxer going into MMA, and you've got to put in almost just as much work as an MMA fighter going to boxing. So, again, it's a piece of the puzzle, boxing going to MMA, and it's a whole bunch of puzzle pieces, but you only have one tiny little one as an MMA fighter going into boxing. Next question. Our friend Joseph Johnson says, I wonder how you feel about legal bare-knuckle boxing taking root in the United States. It seems like it's getting more popular. Okay. I'm actually a big proponent of taking the gloves out of combat sports. Again, 100 years ago, they didn't use gloves in boxing. And they put the gloves in not as safety devices to make boxing more safe, but as weapons. Weapons to make the fight more exciting. Why do I say weapons? Well, because it allows you to punch harder and more recklessly without as much risk of injury to your hands. The most common injury in combat sports is called the boxer's fracture. It is a broken metacarpal, the fifth or the fourth one there. Because when you strike at an odd angle with a lot of force behind it and collide with something like the forehead or an elbow or something like that, well, sometimes these things break. So the gloves help to diminish that quite a bit. Now, if you watch really old boxing matches, and it's hard to find like 100-year-old videos of bare-knuckle boxing, but you can still see the old like Jack Johnson videos where they use the really small gloves, because boxing gloves used to be really, really small with very little or no padding at all. The original boxing gloves were just leather covering the hands to give a little bit of firmness and support to the hands and to stop the skin from breaking. So they were still pretty careful. You watch the way these guys move, they weren't throwing big old flurries, and it was kind of boring compared to a modern boxing match because they were super careful. And there was a lot of pummeling, a lot of positional stuff, not a lot of sniping from a distance. And yeah, it's interesting stuff. I really like watching those old matches. They're very educational. Now, I would love to see MMA go back to its bare-knuckle roots. And I know a lot of people are intimidated by that phrase, bare-knuckle. Oh, that sounds savage. Good. Cage fighting is supposed to sound savage. It is supposed to be a savage sport. It's supposed to be as real as it gets. So take out the gloves. Those are weapons. Or at the very least, take away the wraps and take away the tape under the gloves. And at least that way, you wouldn't skin your precious little knuckles, but you wouldn't have a cast under there, which is basically, it's a weapon is what it is. It's going to lock all these little bones into place, so you got hammers at the end of your arms instead of fists. And that's dangerous. I mean, I got a hole in my head right there. I have a depressed skull fracture because of the way the guy loaded the tape in his hands in my last MMA fight. Man. So you're preaching to the choir about taking away the gloves in the sport of MMA. I would love it if they did that. So, yeah, bare-knuckle boxing, I'm all for it. Bare-knuckle MMA, I'm all for it. I think it would be way safer, as scary as it sounds. I think it would be way safer, and it would change the sport in all kinds of positive ways. Thanks for the question. Our friend Adramalek asks, do you think it's possible to develop PTSD because of too much fighting? Street fighting in particular. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Fighting can be a very traumatic experience. I think my very first professional kickboxing match left me with a case of PTSD. Man, I was a bit traumatized. I'd never been punched that much in the head in my life. And I had been doing combat sports for 10 years before that. I did Taekwondo for a very long time. I'd been kicked in the head. I'd been punched. I'd been punched in the face a number of times before, but not that much, that hard, and with that much frequency as in that first kickboxing match. I got my left ear torn off and then stitched back on right after the fight. And, I was bleeding all over. I was a mess. And man, afterwards, I just remember sitting there in the emergency room in the hospital, just staring off into space, feeling like this is such a weird feeling, man. What happened? What hit me? What happened? Oh, I don't want to experience that again. And it just gave me like shivers and stuff thinking about it. And it took me a while to cope with that. And that was just one fight. So, man, if you're doing a lot of fights, especially street fights, and who knows what can happen there. I mean, if you're seeing people bounce their skulls off the pavement and get killed or whatever, that can be a traumatic thing. I mean, man, to date, I've seen 2 people die in front of me on the street. The first time I saw a man die in front of me, I was a Mormon missionary in Argentina, and I was going door to door. You don't knock on in Argentina. You clap outside the houses really loud, and people come out and talk to you and either tell you no, we're not interested, or sometimes they listen to you. Anyway, we were going door to door, and this dude from Paraguay, this old immigrant man named Gilberto, he comes out and he starts chatting with us, and we're telling him about our church and whatnot. And all of a sudden we hear gunshots, maybe about 100 feet away from us, just down the street a little bit, right where we would have been walking had we not stopped at this house. And we look over there, and it's like boom, 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 boom. And it's like 5 or 6 guys just like executing this dude on the streets, just boom, 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 firing relentlessly after he's down, boom, boom, just to make sure he's dead. And there's a big cloud of smoke, and they run off, and we're all just staring, and I'm just like, what the hell just happened over there? I just saw a man die. And I'm looking over there, there's a pool of blood gathering around, there's smoke clearing, and folks come out of their houses and just peek like, oh. And Gilberto, he was so used to this type of violence in this neighborhood. I mean, it was a third world slum I met this guy in. And, he looks over there, and in this very deadpan voice, he's like, oh, that was Jose. That's too bad. He was a good kid. And then life went on. And I was just in shock. I was like traumatized. I was like, I just saw a man get shot to death right in front of me. I'm only 19 years old. I'm not ready for this. What the heck? How are you so used to this? And, this was a town where you would hear gunshots constantly every night. This was a town where I got mugged all the time at gunpoint. It wasn't the safest place to live in. I mean, there was a lot of gang violence. There were a lot of drugs. There was a lot of people getting shot, and on this particular day, I saw a guy get shot right in front of me, and that traumatized me. So if you are witness to this sort of thing, heck yes, you may develop post-traumatic stress syndrome. You might develop shell shock, as they used to call it. What else? Second time I saw somebody die, like right in front of me. I was walking down the street, here in Shanghai, actually. And there's a grocery store not far from where I live, and this guy's pulling out on his scooter, and this guy peels out of the driveway, boom! Hits the dude with the scooter. The scooter is embedded in the front of the car. The guy goes flying like 20 feet through the air, splat, right on his neck, snap. Blood comes out. He's dead. He's dead right there, just a few meters away from me. And I know I'm flip-flopping between U.S. customary units and metric because I'm an American living in China, and yeah. And I'm looking at this like, just blinking, like. And I was actually shocked at how unshocked I was. You know, the first time I saw somebody die, get shot, I was just like, oh, this is weird and frightening and unnerving. And the second time it was just like, well, I've seen this before. Different circumstances, but there it is again. Death right in front of me. But yeah, it's a different thing, willfully shooting somebody versus, a vehicular accident. Vehicular accidents are one of the leading causes of death worldwide. Man, there are so many traffic accidents here in Shanghai, so many crazy ones. But yeah, getting back to fighting. Fighting and post-traumatic stress syndrome. Yeah, it can definitely cause that, but also there's another condition called combat addiction. You can actually become addicted to combat, addicted to fighting, addicted to the thrill and the adrenaline and the anxiety and the stress and the nerves and all of that stuff is actually quite addictive. And so even fighters who actually hate the experience of fighting and they dread it can still want it, weirdly. Because yeah, that is totally addictive. Anyway, the psychology of fighting is fascinating. Thanks for the question. Our friend Christine Rios asks, what would you consider an adequate amount of experience to start a self-defense academy? Okay, wow, that's an interesting question, especially since it's self-defense as opposed to martial arts academy. Now, if you said a martial arts academy, I would say, well, as soon as you have enough experience to legitimately feel you have something to give back, then cool, go open up your academy. But self-defense, what kind of experience are we talking about? Are we talking about experience actually defending yourself against random attacks? Because if you have a great deal of experience with random attacks, then, is it really that random? I mean, I've talked about this before. I've been mugged at gunpoint 6 times. And each time, just gave the mugger, here's what I have. Bye. Slow movements. Narrate everything you say. Be very calm. Don't get shot. Worked every time. That's good self-defense. But does that make me an expert in self-defense against weapons? I don't know. I've got a lot of experience there. A lot of experience with those muggings, but man, does that qualify me to open up a self-defense academy? Now, I've got to express this again. I'm not a self-defense instructor. I'm a combat sports coach. I specialize in the sport of mixed martial arts, with a secondary emphasis on kickboxing and other ring sports. So I think there's a lot of confusion, especially on the internet, when people watch any of my technique videos. I used to make a lot more than I do now because people just weren't watching them, because people aren't really interested in learning technique, especially technique that works. They're interested in fantasy for the most part. And I think that's a big problem with the self-defense industry, is they like to sell you on a marketable fantasy rather than a pragmatic solution. Just peeking over my shoulder there. Why? Because the pragmatic solution shuts down the Self-Defense Academy and doesn't make money. The fantasy, however, keeps people coming in the door. So I've got issues with the self-defense industry in general, but I'll tell you about a student I had, this girl named Emma, and Emma was very small, and I wouldn't say she was a particularly good or talented fighter, but she understood some really important things about self-defense. that had absolutely nothing to do with physical combat. And she asked me, can I do a seminar here at this gym about self-defense? And I said, well, maybe. What would you want to, what's the seminar about? And she told me, gave me a rundown of the seminar. I was like, wow, those are really good ideas to avoid conflict and to avoid fights and to intelligently protect yourself proactively from potential predators, if you will, without actually getting into, the physical combat side. Because if your self-defense is based on physical combat, you have to be better at violence than your attacker. So Emma's approach to self-defense was avoid the attackers, and these are some tips to do that more efficiently. And I thought, wow, this is probably the best information I have heard, the most realistic information I've ever heard for a self-defense seminar. So I said, yes, do your seminar. Awesome. You got my full support. So Emma did her seminar, and she gave out this great information. And again, she's not an experienced fighter. In an actual fight, I would be worried for her safety if she was fighting somebody bigger and stronger. But I'm pretty confident about this girl defending herself. And there's a difference there. Right? So if you have something to offer that will pragmatically help people, a pragmatic solution as opposed to a violence fantasy, then yeah, open up your academy or whatever you want to call it, or do your seminar. And yeah, if you don't have that solution though, if you don't have the pragmatic solution, go out there and find one first, because that's the experience you need. Thanks for the question. Our next question comes from Princess Mahmoud. I hope I'm saying that right, because this guy leaves some amazing comments on these videos that I love to read. Princess Mahmoud says, I started doing kickboxing, and in my first sparring session, we only did body shots. I suffered a terrible headache where I couldn't move much for 3 days. Is it normal? Okay. Now, a lot of people are under the impression that body shots are safer than shots to the head, because punching the head immediately affects our central nervous system. It jars the brain, and yeah, that is super dangerous. But what does the body contain? It contains the rest of your vital organs. It's got the liver, it's got your heart right there, it's got your pancreas and your spleen and all your guts and all this other stuff. So, and your lungs, of course. You put pressure on the lungs repeatedly without expressing the air correctly, that's going to do a number on you. Being punched in the liver and these other vital organs, well, it's going to release toxins into the body. And the buildup of toxins, well, where does that go? It flows into the blood flows into the brain, and yeah, that could definitely leave you with a headache. So it's not abnormal, especially if you were hitting each other with a great deal of force in the body. So even if you're not doing headshots, even if you're doing body shots, you should still spar with control and still spar taking measures not to injure your sparring partners. Because just because it's not giving you concussions doesn't mean it's not dangerous. So train safe, train smart, and still train hard. You can do all of those, but you got to find the balance. So I hope you avoid those nasty headaches. One quick tip, bring your elbows in close to the body to protect those vital organs when you're sparring, and that's going to solve a lot of those problems. All right, thanks for watching. Get out there and train. Wait, I got other questions to do. Why did I say that in the middle of the video? And somebody called me on that before. All right, next question. Our friend iFan37 says, I have had this question for a while. Is it important to condition your arms and legs, like punching or kicking something hard, like a tree, to make your hands and legs stronger? Do you do it, and is it important? Okay, conditioning the striking points, yes, that is important, but leave our tree friends alone, please, and try using something like a heavy bag. Because for one, trees are just going to be way too hard for you to condition your limbs on. They're going to break you first. In spite of that video that's circulating the internet of that little Russian girl punching punching dead trees into pieces. Don't do that. Leave the trees alone. Trees give us oxygen. Use a heavy bag. Here at the gym, we've got different types of heavy bags. Some of them are really hard, solidly packed. Some of them are a little softer for the beginners. We've got some water bags. We've got stacks of tires and all of this. So different levels of hardness and firmness so that you can progress as you condition your striking points. So yeah, condition your hands by punching things like a punching bag. You can condition your forearms and whatnot by hitting things. Also, one technique, a straight ankle lock, where you catch somebody's Achilles right there, and you put pressure on it with your hips and your arm and your torso in an effort to break the leg, ultimately. A lot of people, when they first learn this technique, they're like, ow, it hurts my arm. It hurts me more than him, because their arm is not yet conditioned. How do you condition your arm? Well, by squeezing legs until you get used to that, until your arm becomes strong enough where it hurts them more than it hurts you. So yeah, conditioning is important, and it's not just for striking, but also grappling. What is conditioning? It is doing a specific activity until our body adapts to that activity and becomes better at it. So yes, I do that, but again, leave the trees alone. Our last question comes from the Fit Kid, who asks, Ramsey, how do you lift every day, train martial arts, and don't overtrain? Is there any advice you can give me? Okay. 1, as far as lifting goes, periodize. That means make a lifting schedule where you are training different muscle groups periodically throughout the week. So for example, you're not going to do bench press every single day. Now, most of my lifting is based around squats, deadlifts, pull-ups, and exercises that, how can I put this, are auxiliary to those. I'll also do cleans and presses. I will do the clean and jerk. I will do snatches. I'll do kettlebells. But I periodize it. Now, how do I train every day? Now, if you are new to training or fairly new to training, and you go and you do a hard 90-minute, 2-hour training session, the next day you might wake up feeling really sore. Oh man, this hurts. How am I going to do this every day? Why? Because your body is still acclimating to this type of activity. Your body is still learning to specialize. I've been doing this for a very, very long time. My body is used to it. So I can spar all day, I can lift, I can train all day, and wake up the next day and be fine. But there are a few other precautions that I take. Besides all the experience, besides the periodization, what did I just say? Periodization, that's a fun word to say. Besides the periodization, focus on those 5 things I always talk about: how you move, how you eat, how you sleep, how you breathe, and how you think. And make sure each one of those is positive. Okay? If your sleeping schedule sucks, there's no way you'll be able to do what I do. If your diet sucks, there's no way you'll be able to do what I do. If you do not breathe in a way that uplifts you, that fills you with oxygen throughout the day, that wakes up your body and wakes up your muscles and wakes up your soul, you will not be able to keep up with me. And if you don't put your mind in a positive place, like Jack Dempsey said, a champion is a man who gets up when he can't. And I love that quote because, so many days when the alarm clock goes off dark and early, like 5 a.m., and I'm like, oh, I'm tired, no, I'm sore, but I remember that quote. A champion is a man who gets up when he can't. So I get up when I can't. How do I do it? I get up when I can't. Why? Because I have to. How do I do it? How do I go to work every day and do this again and again? Why? Because, I've got children at home, 2 small mouths to feed, so why do I get up when I can't? Because I have to. Do I get sore? Do I get tired? Sure. Much less so than I used to when I was a novice, if you will. So experience makes it better. But at the same time, you must harness your will and push through to get up when you can't. Thanks so much for the question.